Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 11th of July, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information by doing a couple things. One of them, you can call the Alaska Weather Information Line, 1-800-472-0391. Follow the prompts there, and if you're, the first or second time you've used that, get a pencil or a piece of paper and write down what you're punching in there each time, and then you can do it a little bit faster next time. You don't have to listen to the whole message to get through your forecast information. Weather.gov/Alaska is a great place to start online, and if you can't find what you're looking for there, feel free to email me at david.snider@noaa.gov. I'm happy to help you find what you're looking for, and if it's broken, let me know. We'll get the right people on it, of course. Speaking of something that is changing that you need to be aware of is weather.gov/AAWU. That's short for the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, of course. And this Friday, some big changes coming your way. The whole page is going to change. If you haven't seen the new site, weather.gov/AAWU, make sure you check that out. The old site is still up and running, and we're making a lot of changes to the new site to make it look and work a lot like the old site. But it is going to be different, and if you haven't seen that already, you really need to take a peek. Please let us know what you think, and if we can fix it, we will. We'd like to make it work for you because flying in Alaska is a big deal, and your safety is an even bigger deal. So make sure you let us know. The web author's email for the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit is right here, nws.ar.awu.webauthors@noaa.gov. It's mighty long, so guess what? It's on the new web page. You can let us, or the old web page, so you can let us know what you think. And if that doesn't work, just email me, and we'll make sure we get it to the right people. Again, weather.gov/AAWU is the place to check out. And thanks to everybody that's already sent in your comments and suggestions. We take those seriously, and hopefully you're seeing the improvements that you've told us about. Now, here's fire danger. As we look at it on this 11th of July, you'll notice that the focus has shifted a little bit. It's primarily up across the central and northern sections of the state. Anything south of this is where we've had at least some decent rounds of rain in the relative recent future there. Some places out west have not been quite as lucky. Across the eastern sections of Norton Sound and the interior of the Seward Peninsula and southern edge of the Noatak Valley there and into the upper and middle Koyukuk. And the upper Yukon Valley is still looking relatively dry, if not extremely so. Fire danger remains high there, and also across the coastal plain, which generally doesn't see a whole lot of precipitation anyway, but conditions there are relatively drier than normal, and fire danger is also on the higher side of things. So something to keep watch of there. Just north of Lake Iliamna as well, on the western side of the Alaska Range, also looking at slightly elevated or higher fire danger for the last 24 hours. South central, southeast, and a large part of the Copper River Basin looking A-OK at the moment, so that's good news. Here's a look at the visible satellite picture. And, if you wanted to start off a weather story about Alaska the last maybe 2 to 3 months, you could start it with one phrase or even a few words there. A low in the Gulf. That's how all weather stories seem to start lately. A low in the Gulf right there. And, it's not a big one, but as most of them have been, they get pretty ragged pretty quickly, incorporating a lot of drier air into the weather system. But if you're in southeast, you're on the wetter side of this weather pattern right now, and clouds and wet weather have been moving through your region today. As we put this back in motion one more time, notice that this morning started off with a wealth of clouds across the central and northern interior and the west coast as well. This is the drier side of that weather pattern. There's a ridge of high pressure here that's been breaking up a lot of the clouds, maybe some morning fog and kind of low scud clouds around Bethel earlier today and also across Norton Sound. But the afternoon brought on the bubbling clouds, the cumulus clouds popping up there across south and western Alaska and across the interior where showers and thunderstorms were back, moving out of the Yukon and moving from east to west. Some of those could bring some heavy rain again tonight. With the central and western chain, another low pressure system here is kind of recycling on itself. We've got one front that's working its way north and east, but that one's already falling apart. You might be able to see it a little bit better here in the infrared picture. Here is one wave and that wave is falling apart. The second wave is rebuilding now across Shemya and out toward AKwx. As that recycles, we'll see that boundary develop and push north and east as we go through the surface charts here in just a few minutes. In the meantime, clouds look to be drying out a little bit more across south central and southwestern Alaska, but you'll see that a lot of this moisture is also wrapping in from southeast, the western parts of British Columbia and Yukon, and moving into south central and the central and southern interior. That's feeding the showers and the thunderstorms that we're seeing a little bit further north this afternoon. We do have a frontal boundary draped across the Brooks Range and starting to push a little bit further southward. It's generally stationary, meaning it's not moving north or south, east or west, kind of holding in that same position. And showers and thunderstorms are forming just on the warmer southern side of that boundary. Moisture is feeding into that. So it's really a pretty good setup for the potential of heavier rainfall across some parts of the upper Tanana Valley there. So don't be surprised if you're heading out, whether it's on your property or you're just passing through town and you notice the river's coming up a little bit more the next couple days. Denali National Park could be one of those spots. Keep your eyes on where you are in relation to the river. Make sure you're not camping in sand or gravel bars there because, when you wake up in the middle of the night and your sleeping bag's wet, the river could be coming up there, so it's kind of a dangerous place to be this time of the year. As we look at tonight's forecast, notice high pressure is trying to work its way back into southern sections of Yukon. It's incorporating more dry air across southeast and northern parts of the Gulf. It's doing a better job in the northern Gulf than it is in parts of southeast where we could still have some rainfall. Showers and thunderstorms will continue around places like Tanana and the eastern Alaska Range and into the central and eastern interior, especially the south slopes of the Brooks Range. Out west, high pressure is also holding on just a little bit longer, trying to break up a lot of the cloud cover across the west coast and into Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. But underneath that will be fog and some morning low clouds there. That should eventually wane away as we get into the mid-morning hours there, so improvements will be had if you're waiting to take off, or land that is. Low pressure out across the west at 996 millibars is pushing a front into the northern and eastern bearing. High pressure is still in charge, and looks like I've scrubbed off some of the numbers here, so my apologies there. This should be about 1014, I believe, compared to 1002 millibars out across the western bearing. That's going to slow it down and try and break up that front once again. So we've got a lot of dry air here across the west. Showers and thunderstorms will be widely scattered across the central and northern interior, and showers across southeast. Look for generally sunny conditions to partly sunny conditions in the afternoon for south central and southwest. And it should be a warmer day for many that are seeing that additional sunshine. By Thursday, improvements all around, including my labeling of the numbers here, 1013 millibars across south central with a few showers over the mountainous terrain. Most areas looking at more sunshine, including through Thursday, and it's going to be a much warmer day tomorrow. Temperatures could be in the mid to upper 80s for the central and western interior, and places like Tanana could reach well into the mid-80s, including Fairbanks in the low to mid-80s there. And a slightly drier day for southeast with a few showers in the region and clouds bubbling up in the heat of the day with light rainfall developing across the Alaska Peninsula, Nunivak Island to St. Lawrence Island. This is the remnants of that frontal boundary here, so as that continues moving eastward, it should weaken even more. Temperatures today weren't necessarily cool across the interior. We'll get to those in a minute, but under clouds and wet weather, it was cool. Upper 40s to mid to upper 50s for many in southeast, from Sitka to Petersburg, Wrangell, 55 around Hyder today. Around the capital city, upper 40s and lower 50s today. Haines and Skagway also in the lower 50s, 55 for Yakutat, 54 in Valdez by mid-afternoon, lower 60s around Cook Inlet from the Matanuska and Susitna Valleys southward toward Kenai at 60 degrees, 59 around Homer. But a balmy 71 in Seward, probably a nice break after some of the recent rains. 67 for our friends in Kodiak, 55 around Healy, 54 in Fort Greely, and 63 in Fairbanks, with 66 around Eagle. Is even warmer down around Northway and Tok. 79 around Fort Yukon just to the west, 82 degrees there. Arctic Village was 68. The North Slope saw temps in the 40s around the Beaufort Seacoast to Point Barrow. 55 around Wainwright. Inland, temps really weren't a whole lot warmer, so it's a big difference when you have a lot of cloud cover there. It kind of evens that out a little bit. Kotzebue Sound temps in the 40s, mid-50s, even 60 degrees as you got a little bit further up inside to the inlet there. 55 degrees around Nome, 61 as you head down the coast, and 57 around Unalakleet. Galena was 64 downriver, 75 around Bethel, 70 degrees today. Look, Iliamna was in the lower 70s. McGrath had 68. 40s and 50s for the Alaska Peninsula. The Pribilof stuck in the mid to upper 40s. They're really not all that unusual. And low 50s for Adak and Atka, with 45 around Shemya and Attu. Overnight low temps back to just about 60 degrees for the interior and generally north of Fairbanks from Tanana and west down the western side of the Alaska Range, mainly upper 50s there. The coastal readings in the 40s and 50s, Nome 48, 35 around Barrow. The upper Tanana Valley and upper Yukon Valley, upper 40s to nearly 50 degrees. Southeast, close to 50 degrees in many locations. South Central and Prince William Sound, upper 40s to mid 50s around the Cook Inlet region, and Kodiak looking at 56 with the Aleutians in the upper 40s. High temps tomorrow, yeah, that's the heat I'm talking about there. Probably low to mid 80s for the Tanana Valley. Toward Tanana itself, looking to be one of the hotter spots in the region at 86. Susitna Valley readings not too far behind in the mid 80s tomorrow as you head down into Cook Inlet, warm along the Kenai. And for everyone heading out with the big net, 73 in Kenai, close to that, if not warmer around Soldotna, 65 degrees for Kenai, or Kodiak, I should say. Low to mid 60s for southeast. Let's look at the North Slope, upper 40s and lower 50s there. 44 around Kaktovik. Compare that to about 46 in Barrow, 55 in Wainwright, even warmer as you head down the coast. Kotzebue Sound temperatures nearing 60 degrees in Kotzebue itself with 62 in Nome. 80 in McGrath at least, and southwestern coastal temperatures will be hovering in the upper 60s to low to mid 70s, with Bethel at 72 a little bit further up the river. Upper 50s, lower 60s for most of the Alaska Peninsula, and St. Paul and St. George could be stuck in the upper 40s once again. Flying weather shows a pretty good start for the interior. Watch for some areas of convection in the morning, though. This could be ongoing from tonight. Pockets of IFR across the central and southern regions of southeast, and IFR widespread across the Bering Sea and, of course, across the central and western parts of the Beaufort Seacoast. That improves, though, in the afternoon down to MVFR for areas around Prudhoe Bay. Widely scattered showers and thunderstorms mainly across the interior tomorrow afternoon, but some of those poking their way into south central. IFR conditions south and west of Nunivak Island, St. Lawrence Island, and probably including the Pribilof Islands. Limited MVFR across parts of southeast, a big improvement over today and again what we expect for tomorrow. Eniktivik Pass, VFR conditions, watching for some showers and thunderstorms on and off throughout the day. Same goes for Adigan Pass, generally clear conditions. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass starting at MVFR, watching for afternoon showers and storms there. Lake Clark, Merrill Pass, and Rainy Pass should all be included in the same group today. MVFR conditions to start, but improvements noted by the afternoon. And for Windy Pass, watch for developing showers and thunderstorms in the afternoon. Isabel Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions to start your day, watching for convection there. Mentasta Pass, VFR generally all day long, but showers and thunderstorms more likely in the afternoon. Same goes for Tanita Pass for your Wednesday. Portage Pass looks like it'll start at IFR, but improvements should be had fairly quickly by mid to late morning there, so watch for VFR conditions closer to the eastern side, perhaps by early afternoon. Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions to start the day with improvements all day long, so good news there. Freezing levels indicate a wealth of warm air. You can see the freezing levels as high as 12,000 feet across a large part of the Bering, even the lower and middle Yukon Valley and the Koyukuk Valley. And then we get into our cooler pool of air sitting across the central and eastern parts of the Gulf, anywhere as low as 6,000 to 8,000 feet across parts of southeast and really parts of south central, just getting a taste of that around Prince William Sound and the far east and southern interior out toward McCarthy and Tok and Chicken. Icing potential is limited. Most of that's pretty high up there, above 10,000 feet, light to isolated moderate at best across some of the central chain and maybe St. Matthew Island. A little bit lower, though, as you get south of southeast. If you're heading out toward Haida Gwaii or running down the coast of British Columbia, you may find some of that just above 8,000 feet. But other than that, again, we've got fairly warm conditions, so that does help a bit. The jet stream has our low pressure center across the eastern Gulf. It's still spinning some faster moving winds on the north and western side, and certainly the southern side, where the main core of that faster moving wind is 70 to 90 knots there from the west and southwest blowing into the Pacific Northwest. We have a weak northerly wind coming in across central and northern and extreme southwestern parts of Alaska, about 50 knots. That's helping to dry things up slowly and building a ridge across the western Bering and Bering Strait. And then we have another low parked out across the west. That's where some of the strongest winds are, those as large as 130 knots across the western Aleutians right now. So one feature of a very slow-moving system, we get the warm and dry air, and weather that likes to stick around for a little while. We'll see how long this one lasts. High pressure sitting across Norton Sound at 9,000 feet, drawing up those southerly winds, 30 to 50 knots across the central and western Bering there. Light winds across the interior, 10 to 15, more of a north and northeasterly flow over the west and northern Gulf, Prince William Sound, and the Kenai Peninsula. And low pressure across the eastern Gulf there. South and southeasterly winds about 10 to 15, more of a north and easterly flow across the northern panhandle there. You see that echoed at 3,000 feet, generally light winds at this level all the way across the mainland, 5 to 10 for the interior, light northerly onshore flow for the north coast, and southerlies strengthening a little bit across the Aleutians and the Bering Sea, as much as 30 to 40 knots there across the northern Bering into eastern Russia. Turbulence potential is fairly limited, nothing for southeast, the north, central, or the west, but we may see some chop along the Cook Inlet region there. Watch for that to come up in the next couple days, below 4,000 feet, and also across the central chain and the Pribilofs, watching for convection in the interior tomorrow afternoon as well. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with a sea ice update in just a few minutes.
You know, the real tragedy of practically every boating-related drowning is that it could have been easily prevented. Wearing a personal flotation device, a PFD, is by far the single most important safety measure you can take when boating. It's a point we've been stressing for years and one that simply cannot be overemphasized. Look at it this way. Virtually every single boating-related drowning could be eliminated if the victim had been wearing a PFD.
It's a time of the year when most boats have long since been hauled out of the water. But for more than 2 million waterfowlers in North America, it's the start of their boating season. Some may use a duck boat to head out to a water blind. For others, their boat may be nothing more than a dinghy used to set out decoys. In either case, these boaters operate in one of the most hostile boating environments of all, near freezing water. Roy LeGrand, recently married, had not had the chance to hunt much during the season, but he and his Labrador Retriever Skeeter knew this point on the river could be a real hotspot in the right conditions. And as the wind picked up, the birds began to move and come in from the bay. Now, it looked to be the kind of day every hunter hopes for. One last duck to fill his limit. And one last retrieve for an already tired young dog. According to what LeGrand later told us, a stiffening breeze and a strong outgoing tide pushed this duck beyond the dog's reach. LeGrand said he knew his dog wouldn't give up on the retrieve and soon would be exhausted and in danger of drowning. A crisis, and LeGrand knew he had to help. An 8-foot dinghy in a high wind and choppy water. Hardly the right rescue craft for this kind of operation. And LeGrand faced the challenge of hauling a struggling 50-pound lab on board a small and unstable platform. A young, fit man and a strong swimmer, LeGrand nevertheless later admitted that he thought he and Skeeter would never make it back to shore.
Nothing can prepare you for the incredible and instantaneous shock to your system when you're suddenly plunged into near-freezing water. Your first reaction is an involuntary gasp, a torso reflex that can prove deadly if your head is under the water. Your heart and circulatory system undergo a tremendous strain, sometimes resulting in cardiac arrest. Consider that a man, even without clothing, if he stays active, can survive on land at 32 degrees Fahrenheit for as long as 24 hours. But cold water conducts the heat from your body some 25 times faster. Your survival time in near-freezing water is literally a matter of minutes. In fact, drowning is often not the cause of death of many victims who fall into cold water. The killer? Hypothermia, the rapid and drastic chilling of the body core. After getting back into his boat, Roy LeGrand was able to paddle back to the dock. His friend said it must have been his lucky day. But the reasons he came back alive had very little to do with luck. First of all, he was properly dressed for the cold. But the single most important thing he was wearing was a flotation jacket, a PFD, something like this one. By keeping him afloat, he was able to expand all of his rapidly diminishing energy into getting back to his boat and getting out of the water. Wearing a PFD is critically important when boating in cold water, even if you're an Olympic-class swimmer. If you fall in without a PFD, it'll be next to impossible to get one on while in the water. In fact, should you capsize or fall overboard in cold water, your every effort should be directed toward just one goal: getting out of the water as quickly as possible. It's a rule Roy LeGrand didn't forget, and it saved his life. Never forget that water assumes an entirely different character as its temperature drops. From an element that is pleasant and refreshing during the summer, it becomes, as it gets cold, one of the most hostile environments known to man. You know, as I look at the accident reports from around the country, it's frightening to note just how many took place in circumstances where there was no obvious danger. A fisherman casting on a quiet lake, a duck hunter setting out his decoys just a few yards from his blind. The fact is, the vast majority of boating accidents happen without warning, at times when they're least expected. Far too many people who use boats as part of their outdoor recreation simply don't realize how easy it is to get into serious trouble, to actually find themselves in life or death situations. If you don't think so, consider that more outdoorsmen die from drowning or cold water exposure than for any other reason. And in the younger age groups, drowning is the second leading cause of accidental death in the country. So if your outdoor sport involves boats, please take this advice to heart. Take the time to learn basic boat handling skills. Courses are available through your state or provincial agencies, as well as a number of private boating organizations. If you drink, you must understand that alcohol greatly increases your chances of having an accident. If you go out when the water is cold, be prepared and know what to do in case of an emergency. If you can't swim, take a course from your local YMCA or the Red Cross. But no one should ever be embarrassed to wear a PFD. It is by far your best defense against drowning. A few preventative measures, some basic safety rules, and some common sense. Nothing complicated, but it can go a long way towards saving your life.
Expect more changes across the Chukchi coast, generally west of Barrow. Things are moving a lot of the ice further and further north and east. With developing and strengthening west and southwesterly winds and warmer air moving in, this edge will be changing quite a bit here. As we get into the Beaufort Sea coast, we're going to have some slightly stronger winds that are moving in from the west and northwest, so this too will be on the move a little bit from west to east in the coming days. So watch for some changes there. A lot of this, though, could be working its way further south. There's still a lot of open water here, and with warm air moving in, even this little section of lower concentration ice will probably disappear here in short order. So watch for changes again from Kaktovik to Barrow, but more and more open water developing in rapid order here. As we look at southeast, winds should stay fairly light across the inner channels for your Wednesday. Generally northerly flow across the northern Lynn Canal, 15 knots and 3-foot seas there, 10 knots and 2-foot seas further southward, all the way down into the Clarence Strait. Off the outer coast, southeasterlies there from Craig and outside of the Dixon entrance, 10 knots with a 5-foot sea, and north and easterlies coming out of Cross Sound and Gustavus, 15 knots with a 5-foot sea there. As we get into Thursday, a little bit more of a southerly push starts to develop. Remember, we've got low pressure a little bit further south here, and we've got that broad, wetter, warmer flow trying to work its way up the southeastern coast. Look for winds to come up in the Lynn Canal to 20 knots with 4-foot seas, still looking at light winds and small seas of the rest of the inside waters, and south and easterly winds developing up the outer coast, 10 to 15 with 4 to 5-foot seas there for your Thursday. In south central, light westerlies inside of Prince William Sound, a little bit higher than they've been in recent days, 15 knots with 2-foot seas. And we're going to watch some winds and waves come up across the Cook Inlet region, 15 knots with 20 knots a little bit further down the coast from Kenai, and 4 to 5-foot seas. So if you're planning to go out for the fish, could be a little bit choppier than it's been in the last couple of days. Light and variable winds outside of Seward and Resurrection Bay. Look for an east and southeasterly flow across the Barrens, and northwesterly winds over Kodiak Island with 3 to 6-foot seas on either side. Thursday, winds diminish inside of Cook Inlet. Look for a light and variable flow in the northern half. The further south you get, a light northerly wind south of Kenai, 2-foot seas on the inside, 4 to 5-foot seas across the Barrens. Westerly winds continue over Kodiak Island, and light northwesterlies return to Prince William Sound, 10 knots and 2-foot seas inside. For the Bristol Bay region, northwesterlies there, if you're out on the water, 15 knots and 3-foot seas, 20 knots across the Alaska Peninsula from Castle Cape to Chignik, and west to northwesterlies across the southern end of the peninsula with 2 to 4-foot seas on the southern end. For Thursday, westerlies developing, pushing into Bristol Bay, 15 knots and 3-foot seas there, 5-foot seas across the Pacific coast, and winds go light and variable down the Bering Sea coast for the peninsula. For the Aleutians, a broad southerly flow there, 20 to 25 knots in just about all areas, 15 knots south of Unalaska and Nikolsky with 5 to 9-foot seas toward the central chain, and 4 to 6-foot seas on the Bering Sea coast with 8-foot seas out in the west. For your Thursday, south and westerly winds push in across the entire chain, save for Unalaska to Nikolsky with a southerly flow, 15 knots and 4-foot seas there. Otherwise, generally small seas for the region, 4 to 5-foot seas for the Bering Sea coast, 6 to 7-foot seas on the Pacific, and 7 to 8 out west there with that southwesterly wind. The west coast looking at southeasterlies for St. Lawrence Island and St. Matthew, 25 knots with 4 to 9-foot seas, northwesterlies for the Kuskokwim Delta, and southeasterly winds up to 20 for St. Paul and St. George with 2-foot seas there. That becomes 3-foot seas on Thursday. Southerly winds starting to move a little bit further north, and 15 to 20 expected for most of the Bering with 4 to 6-foot seas for your Thursday. For the North Slope, broad easterly winds here moving across Kaktovik and Point Barrow, 4 to 6-foot seas there, 4 to 5-foot seas for the Chukchi coast, and an onshore flow into Kotzebue Sound, 15 knots and 3-foot seas for Wednesday. Light southerlies move up the coast on Thursday. We keep our easterly component for the Beaufort Seacoast, 15 to 20 expected there with 4-foot seas where the water is a little more open. Recapping tonight's weather, scattered showers and thunderstorms possible for the interior. Look for light rain and showers for parts of southeast. Things are drying up across the west with high pressure there, but don't be surprised to run into morning fog, and a new weather system coming in across the Bering will push a little bit further north and east in the coming days. Things remain fairly clear for south central tomorrow. Scattered showers and storms in the interior, and showers continue in southeast with high pressure across the north and drier for many in the interior on Thursday. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.